Your life experience, good or bad, is a gift when you share it with others. At Taxi Chronicles, we allow real riders with real stories to share their gift. So hopefully this episode will intrigue, enhance or inspire you. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Morning. Yes, we're back with another rider, another story. Today we are honoured to have somebody who directs TV series, and for all those Emmerdale farm lovers, yes, we've got the one and only Pip in the house. So nice to have you here today, Pip.
Nice to be here.
Okay, so you were telling us about your name.
Yeah.
The history of your name. Recap on that for us, please.
My name is George Philip, but and that's a tradition of one of the boys in my family, the Short family, always being called George. The name should have gone to my elder brother, but my mother, being quite cantankerous, kicked against tradition. So her mother-in-law, my father's mother, insisted that I was called George. However, when I was a baby, I was named George Philip. She called me Pip, and I've been called that ever since I was a baby.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So what is your official title for your career?
I'm a television director. I direct soap, TV soaps.
Emmerdale being one of them?
Emmerdale, Coronation Street,
Oh.
Brookside, Hollyoaks. I've done EastEnders.
We've got a heavyweight in the house, man. A true heavyweight, man. This bombshell, drop the mic. Okay. So how long you been in the business for, and what motivates you?
Ooh, two big questions. I started in the business in 1978 as an actor and worked off and on, more off than on, for 7 years, and eventually got tired of the insecurity of an actor's life. And my then wife was working for the BBC, and she encouraged me to apply for a job that was being advertised at the BBC, which luckily I got. And then I worked my way up through the BBC until I trained as a BBC drama director in 1991.
So when you trained,
yeah.
Was it a degree or was it just a course? What kind of thing was it?
It was an in-house course that the BBC used to run that was a little under 3.5 months in duration, and it was split evenly 50-50 between what's known as single camera drama directing and multi-camera drama directing. And all of the soaps, until recently, the pandemic has caused a major uproar. Until then, all of the soaps, EastEnders, Coronation Street, Emmerdale, were all shot multi-camera. So that's minimum of 3 cameras in the studio.
For any one scene?
For any one scene.
Okay. That's interesting. What would you say you've learnt from your extensive career that you wish you knew when you started?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, I wish when I'd been at school or even at university, I wish I'd known that I could go into television, I always thought that it was only people that went to Oxford and Cambridge that would, qualify to join certainly the hallowed ranks of the BBC. My entry into the business behind the camera is not a traditional route, but as I say, I wish I'd known at school that I could have started directing TV much earlier, because I would have tried to get into the business when I was much younger.
Would you say things have changed for the people coming up now, or is it still quite the same?
It's opening up, thank God, and we're seeing far more diversity in terms of the different people coming into the business. It was sort of dominated by white middle classes, male and female, but we're now seeing a very active and strong move toward diversity, which is only to be applauded, because it just brings in so much fresh blood and talent.
Michael Caine spoke about that. He spoke about being a working class person and coming into acting, and how he was very minority.
That was the case when I came into the industry. That if you were going to go into management, if you're going to go into becoming a producer or a director, you tended to be kind of middle class or upper middle class. And if you weren't, then you were looked on not particularly favourably, and you probably ended up doing one of the more not menial jobs, but you might become an electrician or a prop boy or a prop girl, or doing something like that, rather than a senior position where you might also become a manager.
Okay, that's interesting. How do you deal with those environments? Because obviously you're coming from a different environment. How did you manage to navigate your way around?
I think, Simon, it was more luck than judgment. The BBC, when I joined in 1985, was very good in that it allowed people to move kind of sideways and to try different areas. You could ask for an attachment, and as long as your manager felt that you were capable of doing it, you could ask to move out of the area that you might be working in and go off and become a location manager or go and work in the script department. That was back then. I'm not sure. I left the BBC in 1997, so I don't know how it is anymore.
Okay, I understand. From your experience as an actor, what motivated you to be an actor?
Storytelling. I was, from a very young age, I think I learned to read, certainly by the time I was 4, and I used to read books all the time. I used to love stories. I used to love reading them. I used to love hearing them. And then, as I grew older, I decided I wanted to be a storyteller. So I think being in a play or in a TV show is about telling a story.
Understand. What is the actual, because everybody has an idea of what a director does. They think of Steven Spielberg, things like that. Give us a definition, a day in the life of you as a director, what your responsibilities and roles would be.
Okay. It's my responsibility as a director to steer the ship, as it were, from day to day, to achieve the schedule, to get the best performances out of the actors that I'm directing, to ensure that the cast and the crew that are working with me, and it's a team effort, are all happy and feel satisfied that they've given the best they possibly can on each day. I'm a huge believer in encouraging people and praising people if they've done well, and I think that engenders creativity and positivity.
I'm with you. So I'm just contemplating a bit here. Your fact that you've got the actor's background, is that common amongst directors? Because it seems like you have an advantage if it's not.
It helps enormously, because I think you come to the floor, the television studio or the set or wherever you are, with an understanding of the problems that beset actors when they're actually coming on to set, that they have to be well prepared, they have to know their lines, they have to feel secure, they have to trust me and know that I trust them to give the best performance they possibly can. And unfortunately in soaps, they have far less time than, say, Steven Spielberg would be able to give the actors. We have busy days when we have to achieve sometimes what's seemingly impossible. I've worked on some shows, not Emmerdale or Coronation Street. They're extremely positive in how they treat people, but I've worked on some shows where you start the day and you just think, we're never going to do this. You do. I don't know how we do it, but we do.
So you hit the ground running.
You do indeed. You're actually running a marathon every day.
Mm-hmm. What would be your advice to a young person who wants to get into the industry like you have?
To look visually at things that surround them, either with a stills camera or, we all mobile phones these days have cameras that you can film on, the iPhone and so on. People have been filming movies on them. Start telling stories and start filming them and trying to get them out there, get them on YouTube or get them on different platforms, and just try to tell as many different stories as you can. And if somebody wants to write a film script, which is 10 or 15 minutes long, don't make it absolutely impossible. Don't have fighter planes blazing down the River Thames or, submarines suddenly popping up. Do what you can do within the budget that you've got, or the budget of time and the budget of money, because all of these things cost. Ask people's advice, ask for help. I've been in the industry a long time and I'm willing to help people out and give them advice. I may not be able to come and stand next to them on set, but I'd certainly give them the benefit of my experience.
Where would a young person apply? Would they just apply to the BBC, like say work experience, apprenticeship, or what would they do?
Yeah, try and knock on doors. There are, we've got... TV is a massive industry now around the world, and you think that the UK market, which is still a thriving one, that's probably only 5% of the markets that are around the world. You think of how Apple have gone into TV, how Amazon have gone into TV, making TV films and feature films, HBO, Sky. There's a massive market out there, so there are places to apply to, and places that want to actively encourage fresh blood into the industry.
And their degree they could go for, would it be something like English literature or a media degree kind of thing?
Now, I remember someone told me a few years ago that said that there were more media study students than there were jobs in the media. So sometimes that would be the place to go, because it gives you an overall understanding of what's involved in the industry. But it's equally knocking on doors and asking to become a runner, and starting at the bottom and just working your way up. It's an industry that recognises, I hope, most of the time, the talent of the people that come and are trying to break into the industry. Sometimes you have to be a bit pig-headed and you have to keep knocking at the door, and if you get a rejection or a couple of rejections, you have to pick yourself up and say, right, well, I'm going to have another go. Persistence, politeness, don't be afraid to pick up the phone or to drop an email to someone and say, if you're an actor, will you come and see me? I'm in a show. If you're a young director, you could say, post something on Vimeo or online and say, would you have a look at this, please? And what does it cost? It doesn't cost me or a producer anything apart from a little bit of time. If it's a 15-minute film, that's 15 minutes out of one day,
I'm with you. What would you say to the 16-year-old you?
Me?
Yeah, the 16-year-old you. What would you say to him?
I'd say focus. As I say, I didn't know when I was at school that I could have moved into television and ultimately become a director and a storyteller. And I wish I'd known then. And I think if I could go back in time and talk to me, the 16-year-old me, I would say, try and fulfill your ambitions and don't feel limited by what's out there. Go for it. Try to live your dream.
What directors, actors inspire you? If you could work with anybody.
One of my all-time heroes is Clint Eastwood.
Okay.
I grew up watching his movies as an actor, but even when he was working on Rawhide back in the 50s or early 60s, he was occasionally he would ask if he could direct an episode of Rawhide, and I think he's shown that he's an incredible talent. He's very brave, very visual. I'd love to work with Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Francis Coppola. Oh my God, the list is endless. Martin Scorsese,
Yeah,
it's
Marcus Scorsese, definitely. Yeah, I can see why with Marcus Scorsese. Yeah. As a director, I suppose you work very closely with the scriptwriter because you must share his vision. Is that right? Or do you do
not so much in soaps. We tend to kind of be removed from that, so that the script department with the producers and the storyliners will every 3 months go and do what's called a long-term story conference, and they'll be forward planning possibly 6 or even 9 months ahead. So we're in June now, so the storylines for most of the big soaps will be planned, I'd say, well into the beginning of 2022. If it's a feature film or a bigger drama in the budgets are bigger, then as a director one would work more closely with the scriptwriter and the script editor, so that you have much more input. That's not to say that soap directors don't have an input, but it's not as great as you would think it would be.
But so define to me, what's a producer's role? How's that different from the director?
A producer in television tends to be sometimes they bring a project to a television company, something that they've developed or they've found or they've bought. They might buy a book or they might buy an original script, and then they might bring it to the BBC or to ITV or bring it to any of the big companies like Sky or Apple or Amazon or HBO. And then if that appeals and the television company thinks that it's something that's potentially profitable and is something that they would like to see made and broadcast, then the big thing is finding money to make the best of that particular project.
Okay, I'm with you. So what does the future hold for you now?
Well, at the moment, I have work booked up until April of next year, working on various soaps. After that, I don't know. I'm working with my agent trying to develop some ideas of our own. I've got a very good friend who's a writer, and I've brought those to my agent, and we're going to see if we can get those off the ground. And as well as directing, I think I'd like to start producing.
Okay. So as a director, I'm thinking, as a director, you're on a contract basis then, because you're speaking of an agent.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just like the same kind of setup of an actor.
Very similar.
Okay.
There is, as far as I'm aware, there is still only one staff drama director in the country.
Okay.
And I think he's semi-retired now. Used to work for ITV. So we're all freelance. We're all scrambling to get the same jobs,
So it's definitely who you know.
It's who you know, and it's being as good as
your last job.
Exactly. If you do well and you shoot the schedule and you do something that looks interesting and the producers like it and it gets viewing figures, then you're doing the right things.
So that means every episode, or I'm not sure, I don't know, disrespect, I don't really watch Emmerdale, so I'm thinking every episode of Emmerdale's got a different director at times.
No, you usually have about 3 directors working in tandem. It takes 7 weeks for 4 episodes or 5 episodes of Emmerdale or Coronation Street or EastEnders to be made. So you have 3 weeks of preparation.
For one episode?
For 4 or 5 episodes. Okay. So you work on your scripts, you get them to a point that you're ready to start directing, and then it tends to be that you have 2, sometimes 2.5 very intensive weeks of filming, and then at the end of that you go into an edit and you edit everything down together.
Okay. So it's real long hours, like 18-hour days kind of thing like that?
No, because people would burn out. Movies sometimes do long days like that, but at the end of it people are absolutely exhausted. We couldn't.
You're not going to get the best performance from them.
Exactly, and especially since...
Oh, that's why the stars always have a cabin.
Yeah, I mean, if you think that, as a leading actor, the show might depend on what you do and how you're perceived and the performance that you give. So there's an awful lot riding on that particular performance, which is why they tend to try to look after people and give them caravans and Winnebagos and things for people when they're not shooting, when they're not actually in front of the camera, to go off and be quiet and relaxed and have a bit of me time.
And they always have the big buffet of breakfast, isn't it?
Well, an army marches on its stomach.
Yeah.
And we are an army, it may be 30 people, it may be 40 people. Sometimes, if it's a big production, you could have upwards of 60 or 80 people. So everybody has to be fed and they have to be looked after, because you can't expect people to work those hours. Generally, you start about 8 o'clock in the morning if you're in the studio. If you're on location, it may be 8 o'clock, it may be 8:30, but then you'll probably work for 10 hours with a meal at the start, then there'll be lunch, and then there may be afternoon tea, and then there'll be, if it goes on past a certain time, there might be a dinner as well.
Yeah, it sounds like, I can see what you're saying. It's really, really full on.
It's people talk about it as an industry, and it is an industry, but it's a creative industry. But nevertheless, people wouldn't want to be part of it unless they weren't making money. They still feel that they're creating something artistically satisfying.
Mm-hmm. Talking about money, what's the value of like one episode? You hear things like Game of Thrones, that star actors were getting 1 million each, the 5-star actors. But the overall show, I can't remember how, I think it's like 10 million a show or something.
Yeah, when you think, if a Game of Thrones, an episode of Game of Thrones, which could be 90 minutes long, so that's like a small feature film, that's going to sell around the world, and it recouped Sky. No, was it HBO? I can't remember.
HBO.
It recouped.
Sky had the rights later on
to broadcast it.
Yeah.
HBO would not have invested as much money in that production unless they knew that they were going to get the kind of financial returns that recompense them for their investment. Mm-hmm. And if Game of Thrones is sold in 80 countries or territories around the world, that's going to create an awful lot of revenue,
Yeah, tell me about it.
So you've got shows that the budget might be per episode, I don't know, 150, 200,000 pounds. If it's a a show that's been going for years and all the infrastructure's there, but then you might have another show that is starting from scratch, and the budget could be. It's kind of how long's a bit of string, Simon.
What always confuses me is I understand you get ratings because people watch your channel.
Yeah.
But if something's like on the BBC, how do they turn those viewers into money? Because there's no adverts.
It's more to do with achieving what I guess the charter, the BBC charter said. It wasn't until the late 80s or the early 90s that the BBC started to play the ratings game with ITV. They don't engender massive income from their ratings, but they do sort of fulfill the charter, which is to broadcast to as many people as possible. But also you have BBC Worldwide, which is a profit-making organisation and will attempt to sell BBC products around the world.
Okay. So they're the same thing, but one's bringing in revenue internationally, the other one's just hitting targets that the government set.
That's pretty much it, yeah. Whereas ITV and Channel 4, Channel 5, they will have shareholders, they'll have, regular meetings of shareholders to see how the company is doing and what sort of money and revenue stream they're bringing in, and whether the shareholders feel that their investment is being made the best of.
Okay, that's good. It's been a great interview. You've been a great guest, very informative.
Good.
I'm honoured to have you in my presence.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Last question is, what's the impact you want to have on the world?
I want to feel that I've entertained people, told stories. I want to feel I've made some sort of a mark on the world. One of the reasons I gave up acting was because I didn't want to sacrifice my privacy. I've got friends who are actors that are very well known, and they find it very difficult to exist because they are perceived to be public property. And that's very difficult. If I go out with some friends and they're immediately recognised and people are all over them, and all they want to do is maybe have a meal or have a drink or do something, but they're not unpleasant about it, but they find that sometimes it's a little overwhelming. Exactly. I guess I'd like to be remembered as somebody that treated everybody as well as I possibly could, and that I treated them as I wanted to be treated myself. And my father, who I have a great deal of respect for, was always considered to be a gentleman by the people he worked with, and I'd like to have that as my epitaph.
Okay, that's good. Well, thanks a lot for that.
Pleasure.
And we wish you well.
Thank you.
We hope you liked that Taxi Chronicles interview. Don't forget to share and subscribe to get the latest episode. Ever considered investing in the continent with the fastest growing economies and population on Earth? The same continent that holds 30% of the world's known natural resources. Listen to our sister podcast, Africa Investor Stories, where you hear real investors with real stories from around the world share their experience of investing in Africa. We post Monday and Thursday at 10 a.m. British Standard Time.